Reed Farrel Coleman. 6 hit series. And Nick Ryan is number 7.
People have called Nick a kind of urban James Bond. He's part Jack Reacher, part Equalizer, but he is also a guy who has a passion for the least amongst us.
And like his creator, Nick Ryan is a Brooklyn boy, a troubled anti-hero who operates outside the law and in the shadows of a city that never sleeps.
It's about the characters. People think about my characters long after they close the book. They talk about them. That's the best part. That's a great feeling.
Reed Farrel Coleman, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So this is Pub Week, right? Not Pub Day.
Today is Pub Day.
Pub Day. Oh wow.
It never gets old.
Yeah.
It's still exciting, but it's not quite as exciting as it once was.
Yeah, and you mentioned before we started that this has been a delayed start for you guys.
Yeah, well, what's funny is at the book launch party last night in Manhattan, my daughter was there, and she 3 weeks ago gave birth to our first granddaughter. And I said, that baby took 9 months, this book took 3 years. It was like the gestation period for an elephant, this book, so.
Oh, was that because of the shutdowns and all that?
Yeah, the pandemic. It kept getting pushed back and pushed back and pushed back.
Yeah, so I'm sure you're like relieved.
Oh, it's great to be out, but I'll tell you something. Because of what happened during the pandemic, I changed the book. Not about the pandemic, but things that happened during the pandemic, like the George Floyd killing, changed the book. So, and I rarely ever do that, but it was called for.
And it was such a crazy, packed couple of years of things happening that you couldn't just go on as normal.
Yeah, I tried. I normally, the only world I think about when I write is the world in my head and the world in the book. And that was just unavoidable. I could not do it with this book. So in fact, the delay made it a better book.
And this is the origin story for Nick Ryan, first book in your new series. So this is like the baby.
Yeah, talking a lot of babies, yeah. But that's for me, and I don't know, I know you've interviewed a lot of other authors. The first book in a series is always the scariest and the most fun because it's world building. And you know, that's when you get to play God. And if any author tells you they don't enjoy that, they're lying. Because you're creating the world in which your character is gonna operate. I have a friend, Peter Spiegelman, an award-winning author, who always says, setting is the soil in which you grow your characters. So this was me germinating the seeds, planting them in the soil, and seeing what came out. So that's fun.
So tell us about Sleepless City and tell us about Nick Ryan, of course.
This is the book with the most plot I've ever had in a book. Let me describe it in a way that other authors have described it. People have called Nick a kind of urban James Bond, or he's part Jack Reacher, part Equalizer, and he is those things. But he is also a guy who has a passion for the least amongst us. He has a real affection for the little guy. And because he grew up, you know, in a middle-class house in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn, and from a cop family. So he is a cop through and through. But here's the kicker. Nick's father was a cop who testified at a corruption hearing voluntarily. And I don't know if, you know, your audience knows about cops, but the son of a rat is a rat. So although Nick is great at his job, he's an outcast at his job. So he's a great undercover cop, and he does 2 tours in Afghanistan, and he comes back from Afghanistan, and there's somebody who needs killing. a serial pedophile and murderer who gets off on a technicality, not giving too much away. And when Nick decides to take the whole justice system into his own hands, he finds out his whole world kind of gets turned on its ear. And he's offered a job to basically be the city's fixer.
One of the things that you can sense about Nick right within these first few pages is that he's at a very tricky place in his life. He's a man who's both very certain of who he is, but also at kind of loose ends.
Well, that's what doesn't that make a character interesting? I mean, a character with no blind spots, no foibles, and no vulnerabilities is a boring character. And Nick is that great dichotomy, that great paradox. Like you say, he's always been the guy in the eye of the storm. When the storm is swirling around him, he's calm. He's always been that way. And he's always been sure of his own talents. But the world doesn't always cooperate with that. The world doesn't care about us. And so that's where Nick is.
You can tell he's at that stage in life where he knows who he is, but the flip side of that is the dark stuff too. And when you know what you're capable of, you know what other people are capable of.
Yes, and Nick certainly knows from his 2 tours in Afghanistan and from working undercover on the streets what the worst of us is and what people are capable of. And generally people say, are you the character that you write? And Nick is not. Nick and I are not alike, but I also know what people are capable of, so that was easy for me to imbue Nick with that, because I don't know if you've read this, but when I was 15 years old, I watched somebody die of a gunshot wound as close to me as you are, and that has never left me. I suppressed that memory, strangely enough, for a very long time, but I was going to work at a Baskin-Robbins, of all places, and I heard a gunshot. I knew it was a gunshot. Don't ask me how I knew it. I knew it wasn't a firecracker, and I knew it wasn't a car backfiring. And like Nick, I ran to it and not away from it. And a man fell into the street and died right in front of me from a gunshot wound. It was a very strange experience, and it's never left me. So that was easy for me. That's always, the dark side is always the easier part for me in a character.
There's a before and after when you experience something like that.
Yes, yeah, especially when you're 15 years old.
Yeah, an age where you're very open to those lessons.
Right, and it's a lesson. I mean, I hate that somebody had to die to teach me that lesson, but it's a lesson that's helped my writing.
So tell us about the plot too, because you have Nick as your main character, lots of other characters. This is a very complex plot and a very complex cast of characters too, that we're going to now get to know better throughout the series.
Yes, since I've written so many series, you learn as you go, and so it's really good to populate in that world building interesting secondary characters. I will never call them minor characters, because to me, when I write them, even if they're on the page for one paragraph, to me they have full lives. And I always try to remember that when I'm writing about secondary characters. There are 3 basic things Nick has to deal with in this book. There's a guy who's, the papers call Mini Madoff, or Baby Bernie, who has pilfered $1 billion from the uniformed police unions. And since his brother lost all of his money that way, Nick has a personal investment. Mm-hmm. There's a Alex Jones type of character here, Holocaust denier, school shooting denier, who's basically doesn't believe anything that he says, who Nick has to deal with. And there's the pedophile, of course, and the shooting of unarmed black teenagers, in which that is a crucial point in the book. But I don't want to give too much away about how Nick deals with it, but he has to deal with it. Either when Nick is offered the job, the handler says to him, Nick, how much you're a very good detective. You're a great detective. You've taken tons of drugs off the street. Has it done any good at all? And I think that's something people think about. I know cops think about that. That, you know, uniformed cops, they're not the ones who have to worry about. They show up, they're the first on the scene, but then the case goes somewhere else. But detectives have to think, how much good am I doing? Like, okay, I put away this murder and this murder and this murder, or I caught that drug dealer, that drug dealer. But does murder stop? Does drugs dealing, does it ever stop? No, so Nick is now offered a job where he actually can make a difference. You know, part of the fun for me is, what would you do if I offered you that job? If you had to make the decisions Nick makes, what would you do? So that's fun for me because I'm thinking, what would I do? And I wouldn't necessarily do what Nick does. You know, I didn't want Nick to be perceived as a white knight or a white savior. Okay?
Which is so tricky.
Right. This book covers some touchy ground. And, you know, there are characters who argue with Nick about, you shouldn't have done that. And they're there to represent the other side. I don't like superheroes. I wish they existed, but I don't like superheroes because they don't exist. And we all have to make these really, in our lives, we're not cops, we're not detectives, but we all have to make very hard decisions. And I love making them, ramping them up and letting readers think, okay, do you think he's a hero or don't you think he's a hero? What would you have done? And I mean, that's what's really fun for me.
And that goes to the heart of something that you try to explore in all your work, and especially too in Sleepless City, and that's the truth. What exactly is the truth?
In this book especially.
Right.
Like, you know, that the whole discussion of, yeah, you brought up secondary characters, and Lenny Feld is, to me, like my friend Peter Blauner, who's also a novelist and who wrote for Blue Bloods and writes for Law and Order, he said he could read a book about Lenny, just a book about Lenny. And that, I love hearing that. And Lenny is also one of the moral centers of the book. And then I don't do this on purpose, but it just works out that way, that there are often characters who become the kind of the voice of morality in the book. And Nick is clearly not that. He tries to be a moral person, but he is not the voice of morality. He's got to be pragmatic. And there's, Martellus Sharp, and there's Lenny, and they're like the two sides of, okay, we're moral, we know what's right, and we're going to pull and tug at you, but you're the one who has to make the decisions.
I thought that about Lenny too as I was reading it. I thought, I want to know more about Lenny. But then I thought, oh, that's the nice thing with the series, you know, you don't know what's coming. There you go. Exactly.
Yeah.
Those other characters to me too, as a reader, are the characters that make the story real. They're what allow you to see this world in a bigger way.
Right, because I think what readers do is they identify with one of the characters. Of course, the main point is you'd love for them to identify with Nick, but not everybody's going to identify with Nick. Okay, who do you identify with? Do you identify with Callie, the reporter? Do you identify with Martellus Sharp? Do you identify with Lenny? Do you identify with Shayna?
Okay, that's my next question. I don't know what to even call it. I'm like, it's not really a romance. It's not real. I mean, it's so much deeper than that because Nick, he's spoken for since the age of 16,
yes,
in a way, by his very first love, who is
Shayna,
who is reappearing.
Nick is an Irish Catholic and Shayna is Jewish from a well-to-do Upper East Side family.
It's a big deal in New York,
yes,
especially too, because it's very tribal.
Yeah, and Nick, you know, as Nick says, he was always, to Shayna's friends, he was kind of like, you know, a toy. And then that's funny because if you say you're a cop at a party, you know, I've been with cops when it's, oh, can I see your gun? You know, it becomes like, you're almost like a freak. It's like being in a freak show. And so Nick And one of the things that qualifies Nick to do his job, as his handler says, is sometimes you're going to need to know the difference between the dinner fork and a salad fork. So Nick's exposure to having the world of the Upper East Side and money and people of different religions and, the melting pot will help Nick do his job.
And there's also, I don't want to spoil the plot, of course, but there's also a wrinkle to that story too that's interesting that we're
Yes.
So much to look forward to
with
this series.
I don't want to give that one away.
I won't, I know.
Yes.
So where are we going? I know you can't tell us a lot, but what kind of things are we going to see?
Well,
You've already got the next one written,
yes,
right?
It's called Blind to Midnight.
Okay.
And I can tell you a little bit about the plot. Is somebody Nick grew up close to is murdered senselessly, what seems like a senseless murder. And while he's still doing this Prince of the City in the Shadows job, he is now also investigating even though no one wants him anywhere near it, the murder of this person who was close to him growing up, like an adoptive uncle, almost.
Yeah.
That's what's next in Nick world. But I also wrote 2 other novels during the pandemic.
You're working ahead, right?
Always do. Yeah, I'm always worried. People go, "How long does it take you to write a book?" 6 months.
Right, because it's a job.
I always, it's funny when I checked into the hotel today. It was, I have this conversation all the time. It's not a hobby. It's my job, and I do it 7 days a week. Now I can't. Obviously, when I'm on tour, you can't do it. You try, but you can't. But otherwise, 7 days a week, as many days as I can. It's my job. It's not, this is not wood making, dollhouse furniture. The people who do it for a living, but it's not a hobby. Believe me, no one would do this for, just for the hell of it. The pay is nice sometimes.
Right, but you earn it, yeah.
But you earn it. And, if I worked at the cargo area at Kennedy Airport for 5 years. Have you ever seen Goodfellas?
Yeah.
Those are the people I worked with.
Oh, yeah. I grew up with those.
If it fell off the truck on Tuesday, we were wearing it on Wednesday or selling it. And if I had stayed there, I believe me, would have made much more money than I've made in the course of my career. But, I was born, I was born to do this.
You can't turn it off.
Yeah, I'm afflicted with it. It's chronic.
Right.
And I'm not, I'm good at some stuff, but this is the only thing I'm truly good at.
With all of that said, too, when does the magic happen for you?
I liken this to golf because I, strangely enough, even though I grew up in Brooklyn, I do play golf. And golf, there's a saying in golf is you screw up on the last hole, and now you want to come back because you want to make sure that doesn't happen again. Or you have a terrible round, and then you chip in from 50 yards out and you go, see? So, yeah, there are magic moments in writing. We often talk about, you'll write a sentence and look at that sentence and say, there's not another freaking person who ever lived who could write that sentence that way. And like that, those are a magic moment. Or I'm on the plane today, and a phrase pops in my head. He's always so comfortable in his own skin. All he wanted to do was jump out of it. And that's, like, to me, that's a start of a book. That's a magic moment. I don't know where that came from, but that's possibly the start of a book. So that's what but that's, one line or one paragraph out of 300 pages.
That's the gift, and now you have to do the work, right?
You have to
figure out where
fake it for 299 pages in 2 paragraphs.
So tell me about your fans. You're going to meet them here in St. Louis after you speak with us. And the crime fiction crowd is a fun crowd.
Yes.
Right?
And St. Louis, by the way, I have to say, big reading town. Next to New York, I would say this is my second biggest audiences here. And they don't charge me as much as my fans in New York do. No, I have a big following here. And it's always strange because you never, well, of course, New York, it makes sense. St. Louis, But I do. The St. Louis, big readers,
Yep.
big crime fiction readers. You used to have 2 or 3 mystery bookstores here. Everybody's fallen on top. New York, we used to have 4 crime fiction stores, and now there's 1. So
one of the things too I think about crime fiction fans too is they are like, you can't get anything by them. They're and they will say it to you. I'll bet, right?
Yeah,
they don't hold back.
No, you get a bunch of crime writers together, and one of the stories we all tell is the person who caught you making the mistake about the Smith & Wesson. That gun does not have a 5-inch barrel. It has a 6-inch barrel, or that cylinder holds 5 bullets, not 6 bullets. And they are rabid fans. Like I was for a long time been friendly with Lee Child, and Lee was almost physically attacked when Tom Cruise played Jack Reacher, and it's like, Lee just wrote the book. He didn't, and he sold the rights. He didn't cast Tom Cruise as Jack Reacher, but mystery fans are. And we wouldn't want it any other way, but it is really, mystery fans are intense, and they know your work. They know your work better than you do. That's the scary part.
So usually we say what's next, but we kind of know what's next for you. But in between, do you ever have to do sort of like a cleanser? Sometimes when you're doing a series, do you ever want to take a little bit of a break, or is it the opposite in that you just want to go deeper into that world?
No, I don't think there's one answer to that, but for me, what I do for a cleanser is I write a short story. So to me, it's a different talent, and I've never written a short story and not come out the other end a better writer.
So after one of your readers finishes one of your novels, what do you want them to walk away feeling?
Feeling that they should spend more money on more of my books.
That they have to read everything.
They don't have to read it. They just have to buy it. At my signings, I often say, they make great doorstops. No, I don't, what I want readers to think. I want readers to think about the protagonist. After you ask somebody 2 weeks after they finish a book what the plot is, right? Or if it's a literary novel, a book without a plot, they don't know. It's character. The thing that carried me this far is a simple phrase. It's the character, stupid. So it's about the characters. And people think about my characters long after they close the book. They talk about them. That's the best part, is when people talk about Mo or Gus or Dylan or Gulliver and hopefully Nick as if they're people. That's cool when readers talk about them as if, I hang out with them. That's a great feeling.
Reed Farrel Coleman, thank you so much for joining us. It has been so much fun to talk to you.